Okay, this is the next section, a little bit left over from the five-piece Northwest Company, is that we did about, 4 or 5 or 6 shows on Let's Go, which was a cross-Canada TV show. It came from a different city every night of the week. 5 nights a week. There was Vancouver, Winnipeg, Montreal, Toronto, and Halifax. I think that was and each week had a different band, and so we were actually featured on one with Jimi Hendrix. He wasn't at the studio, but I remember Jerry Lee came to the studio. We didn't meet him either, but not at the time. But we did play with famous bands. I did meet the Rolling Stones 3 times in one night when me and Frank snuck into their concert in about 65, Frank Babakayev, at the Agrodome. So, and the Northwest Company, we did play with, all together, throughout the years, we played with The Who, the Beach Boys, 10 Years After, Boz Scaggs, The Byrds, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Mash McCann, Chuck Berry, just to name a few. I'm going to go through famous people in another section, but now this section here is basically about the 4-piece band. Gowan doesn't remember too much about it because it was kind of we decided Rick McCarty was. Gowan did a lot of the deciding in the band, but we kicked Rick McCarty out of the band. I was actually pretty involved in that family because the McCartys had put me up for nearly free to live at the house when I came back from New Zealand, so it was a real awkward moment for me. I can't remember where Rick and I were living at that little house that we had down by the river. We had a little house down by the river there at one time, and either there at the driving range, and we booted Rick out, and we decided we all had quit our jobs, so we decided we were going to move into the city, into town. And Rick was he was a good front man, we decided years later. But he was kind of a haywire guy. He used to get drunk and do all kinds of stupid things. I can't think of all the things he did. I heard him running down the golf course with no clothes on, but I kind of did a lot of stupid things too. But he would get kind of gross at parties. So anyway, he was quite the guy. When he got drinking, he was pretty haywire. So anyway, we did kick him out, and then Daryl B., our manager and the disc jockey from Seafund, was totally pissed off at us for kicking Rick out, and then we never showed up at the Grouse Mountain gig that he had lined up there for us, and we were supposed to go up there and play at a big party, at a ski party, and we shouldn't have done that, that's for sure. Anyway, he dumped us after that, and so we thought, heck with it. We were experimenting in LSD and everything at the time, so we actually moved into town from Maple Ridge, the 4-piece, Ray O'Toole, Gowan, myself, and Vidar Skoftaby. And we moved into a house in Burnaby, North Burnaby, it was down Texaco Drive, which is on the Barnett Highway. There used to be a Shell refinery near there. And we moved down there, and it was out of Burnaby. That's back when McDonald's had burgers for 19 cents. But we moved down there, and it was like heaven down there. We had this house. It was 2 stories, and the roadies moved upstairs. I had a bedroom downstairs, and then there was the other couple of bedrooms. Marilyn and Vidar had a bedroom, and Gowan and Ray had a bedroom somewhere. And we used to practice in the living room. And we played so loud that when the train went by, we couldn't even hear the train. And the train track was right outside our door. And we were actually right by the train crossing. And we wrote a song called The Train, which is featured on one of the live albums. It's called the African Jam, but it started as the Train Jam, I think. And my bedroom was really neat. I had drawings all over my walls. We'd smoke dope, and then I'd give pens to people, and we'd draw all these like cartoons and all kinds of neat. A lot of them are really great. I wish I had pictures of them. And that's the time. And down our Texas Drive was like it was like living in a park. There was no houses near us, only one house way up the road. And there was an old fisherman that used to have a boat down there he worked on every day, and he drank all the time. He was always sipping off a Mickey, and him and me he was kind of like Ernest Hemingway. We used to, trade stories. I even caught a few flounders down in there, in the inlet down there. And I used to walk down the inlet, take LSD sometimes, or walk down the inlet. There was an old, it must have been some kind of an old, it was like cement with bricks and everything. It was some kind of an old foundry or something down there. It was sort of magical down there. And I used to wander around down the beach there, and it was a lot of fun. And that's when I met my best friend, West. His name was David Alexander Brown. He wrote a lot of really neat songs. He wrote California Drag Stripping Baby, The Waves, which I recorded. And he became a lifelong friend of mine. And he was also good at art. But he got me into health foods because he was eating brown rice. He lived up the street in a little place where a cement factory had a house by it. And him and this guy named Peter Pan lived up there, and they used to take acid all the time, LSD. And so anyway, I started doing LSD with West and everything. And he was such a neat guy, 'cause he played auto harp, and he knew Joni Mitchell, he knew Steve Stills, he knew Neil Young. He used to be a folk singer back in Toronto, and he was very smart and had a lot of insight about everything. I'll probably do a whole chapter on him, but he influenced me a lot in my songwriting and everything. He was a little bit younger than me, not much though, but he died a few years ago. He ended up driving cab all his life, but I don't know whatever happened to Peter Pan. And we used to practice in the room there, and we actually recorded a single down there with Vidar singing "Can You Remember," and we recorded that at Sycord again. But Marilyn, Vidar's girlfriend, moved in Marilyn into the house, and then it became, I don't know, it just changed everything. It wasn't, the band lost all its punch, It kind of was bad. I remember meeting a guy named Dale Wicks, who became a friend of mine. He sold me an old clunker of a car, a Renault, like a little crappy car. I found out it had a cracked block later on, so that was a waste of money. I did meet some kind of a sleazy girl there. I think I brought her home from a gig or something. She hung around for a week or so till we finally got rid of her. She wanted to move in. Everybody wanted to live at our house. I remember messing around with her up in the bush. Gowan doesn't remember her, and then we met Brian Slobodian and Gary Aikens. They were sort of pot dealers out of North Burnaby. Gary Aikens was a crazy bugger. We used to go down to, remember being down at the Gastown Inn years, I don't know if it was around that time, or the Gastown Inn was like a big drinking place down in Gastown, and there was the Anchor too. All the hippies used to go down there, and the travelers, and drink and do drugs. And he had a gas mask with a pipe on the end. And I remember it was really illegal back then, but everybody did it anyway. We were smoking from this gas mask. You put it on your face and inhale when they lit the pipe. That was down around then. It was kind of like Malcolm Lowry also lived down in that area at one time, the guy that wrote Under the Volcano. Pulitzer Prize-winning book. That's a great movie if you ever see it, with Albert Finney. And then I remember going with West out to Ioko lots of times. There was, who was it? A couple of people lived out there. Claude and somebody else. Claude and Darka was a girl, but she lived up in they moved to Naramata later on. But there was also another real skinny, unhealthy girl. I can't remember her name. I'll think of it later. We used to go out there and he'd score a joint and then we'd bring it back and smoke it up. And but that's when we were recording. We recorded only the one single as a 4-piece. And then we ended up, Vidar decided that he wanted to quit the band and become a mechanic or an accountant. And so we were doing a lot of acoustic kind of music and kind of slow. He wrote these slow songs and they just didn't go over very good at the gigs for the Northwest Company. So when he left, we were actually glad. He moved up to Tappan and he died a few years ago. He became an accountant or something out there. And him and Marilyn had kids, and it just didn't work very good having a girl living in that house. The two guys, the roadies, lived upstairs, and we had a skunk coming in that house. It was living in the walls. You could hear it crawling around in there, and I remember it came out of the wall one night, and it used to come out in the middle of the night from behind the stove somehow, and it came out, and I was laying in bed sleeping, and I heard this noise. I woke up, and there's a skunk right beside my bed walking around. And so I just thought, oh, no. So I laid still, and I heard it walk out of my room, and it went through the kitchen and went up the stairs into the bedroom up there, and where the two roadies were sleeping, Pitman and Kenny, and we called him Teddy, but anyway, he was like a teddy bear. He became a famous singer after years later. I didn't even know he could sing. Should have got him in a band. But Ken McCall, he worked with Night Train Review and I think Zingo and a whole bunch of bands around town. He's quite a really neat guy. He used to jump up and pouch on Gowan's arm or something like a kid, like a little bird or something. But anyway, the skunk went up, and I heard it go up the stairs, and all of a sudden I heard, "Hey, what's that? Oh, what's that?" And then they started yelling, and a skunk blew off upstairs and stunk our whole house up. Oh, my God, for days. And I ended up, I had my dad's .22. I ended up shooting the damn thing behind the stove. I don't like to kill things, but anyway, it's either the skunk or us, so... Anyway, that's then Vidar left the band anyway, and I can't really remember much about what gigs we played. Can you remember that song? I'll have to look up and see what the flip side of it was. So, thank you.